Hello everyone, here we are on the 24th of February. I'm just going to stitch this one here today. Thought we might continue the spring theme today, and I'm going to do probably some little crocuses. So I've picked out some lilac and yellows, and I've got a couple of greens here. The first green I'm using is a hand-dyed vintage cotton. It's very, very fine. Possibly slightly finer than one strand of DMC, but one strand of DMC would be fine. And then I've got a slightly different green in a fine silk. So I'm going to start with those. It's actually going to look quite similar to a smaller version of this little panorama of snowdrops. But let's see how we get on. Right, just turning this sideways so I can get at it more easily and see what I'm doing. I'm just going to start with some very simple little straight stitches along this edge, and I'm going to vary the angles slightly. Crocuses have quite dark stems and leaves, so I'm just going to do some random-ish straight stitches here. And I know it's not spring everywhere. This is my northern hemisphere bias. But you know, my stitching reflects my reality, so have a look out of your window and stitch whatever you can see today. And again, this isn't a stitch along. I don't intend anybody to stitch the same as me. And a few weeks in, you know, I hope you're finding the confidence to have a go without using mine as a reference, because that will make it a lot more personal and a lot more meaningful to you. So just see, this is just straight stitches here. I'm just kind of filling in this space. Some of these will be leaves and some will be stems. It's just really to get some colour down in this foreground. Right, so that was a needleful of the very fine vintage cotton, and I'm now coming in with the fine silk in a slightly different green, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing. And some of these stitches will overlap, and that's fine. You're kind of layering stitches on top of each other a little bit, just to give that sense of lots of leaves and stems. And I may even do a third run with a slightly darker green, but we'll see how we get on. And again, it's just straight stitches. We're just piling them up really, just to get some colour on the ground. Nothing very difficult here at all. Just coming to the very end of this thread, and you can see it was just the same again, just with a slightly different green. Lots of straight stitches, quite small, quite close together. Just having a look at it, this is after two needlefuls of two types of green, and I'm thinking I might just bring this up a little bit so there's a little bit more height there. So I've got another length of, this one is DMC thread, this happens to be 3345. It's kind of a sort of a wintry late spring kind of green, just one strand, and I'm just going to add in a few little darker areas, just for some bit of height and a bit of shade. And you can see that these stitches are quite long, and of course that doesn't matter, because what we're going to do is stitch over the top of it. We're going to stitch the flower heads over the top of these very long straight stitches. So I'm not worried at all about how long these stitches are, because they'll all be fixed down quite securely when we start adding the flowers. Right, I've got to the end there. I think I'm just going to come back the other way until the thread runs out. Trying to place these stitches anywhere where I can see a gap. And I don't necessarily want to fill all the gaps. Just maybe where it just needs a little bit of something a bit darker. Right, so you can see that's made that little fringe of greenery a little bit more dense. I think I prefer that. Right, I've come up with some silk pearl 12 thread. This is it's a hand-dyed kind of purpley lilac. 1 or 2 strands of DMC would be pretty similar, I would think. And I'm just going to do a little detached chain stitch there. And I'm just going to dot these around along the length of this thing. I might do some on the ends of these taller shoots. Just fairly randomly. And then I'm going to come in again with some yellow. And then we'll sort out what we're doing with the sky. I'm going to come in here with some yellow, and I don't have a hand-dyed yellow in the shade that I want, so I'm going to mix a couple of colours. I've got a DMC 726, that's a kind of daffodil yellow, and then I've got some more of this very fine vintage cotton, which is more of a vibrant yellow. So I've got 1 strand of each in the needle, and of course you can do that, you know, you can mix different kinds of thread together in the needle. It doesn't all have to be the same kind of thread. And therein lie some very happy experiments. So same again, just a little detached chain stitch. And you could of course do white as well if you wanted to, or any other crocus colour. I mean, they're mostly yellow, purple and white, aren't they, I think. And again, you're just going to dot them around wherever you think you want them to be. And I'm trying to place them fairly randomly so that they don't end up, you know, in a straight line. So I'm just going to carry on doing that until I've got enough yellow. There we are, that's our crocuses done. I'm just going to put something kind of bluish up here, and I'm actually going to use this variegated DMC. This happens to be 67. I don't know how old that is, I don't know if they still do it. But I mean, any kind of sky blue would do, wouldn't it? And it's just 1 strand. And I'm probably just going to do a few little running stitches just to suggest some spring sky. One of the few days recently it's not actually raining. We've had so much rain recently. Just turning this round because it's easier to get out. There's less to get hold of because this is near the top of the cloth. There's just less to hold. If you turn it round that way. I'm just fairly roughly adding some running stitches here. See, this pale blue is very, very subtle on this background, but I can probably see it better in real life than you can on the camera. And you can always come in with a slightly darker blue in between if you feel that you're using something that's too pale. People often ask me what size needle I'm using or what kind of needle I'm using. And the honest answer is usually I have absolutely no idea. No idea what size it is. That, looking at it, I would say that's probably a sharps. But I also use quilters needles. I like them because they're small and short, and they're quite easy to manoeuvre in a small space. If you use DMC stranded floss a lot, you're probably more used to embroidery needles. But because I use a lot of my own hand-dyed threads, I very rarely use DMC thread. I find that sharps and quilters have a slightly rounder eye, and because the threads I use have a round core rather than being flat, like when you lay two strands of DMC together, you get a kind of flat thread because they lie side by side. Whereas with something like that's not a very good example, but something like a 2-ply silk, it's more of a round core than a thin flat one. And that's the reason I prefer sharps and quilters. The other reason, I mean, there are many reasons I use those needles, but basically what you need to do is use a needle that you find comfortable and a needle that fits the thread you're using without being too tight in the eye, or indeed too loose. If it's too loose, it'll keep falling out. If it's too tight, it'll interfere with the twist in your thread. So needle is very much personal choice. And I keep doing this way you can't see it, don't I? The best thing really is to try a few different types, different sizes, different brands even. Just find out what you like. I've still got some thread left, so I'm going to do a few more rows in this. This is one of the reasons I prefer my own hand-dyed thread, because that is a variegated thread, but in a single length of it, it doesn't change colour that much. Whereas my hand-dyed threads change colour much more often than this. This is coming out as if it's one flat colour, even though it's not. And I think what I might do for filling in the spaces between these other rows is find a fine silk that's slightly darker. I've just found this pale blue hand-dyed silk thread. I think it's actually extra fine silk, so it's slightly finer than the fine silk that I normally use. I don't sell that one anymore. It turned out to be too much trouble because it takes ages to wind, it breaks very easily, it gets tangled very easily. It was just too much work. So this is the same sort of blue but a bit darker. I'm just going to fill in some of these very pale gaps. Just putting the last few stitches into this sky, and I much prefer this the way this slightly darker sky blue is adding a bit of colour. There we go. So I think that's probably going to be finished, isn't it? Yeah, I think so. So if you're stitching spring flowers today, have fun. Whatever you're stitching today, in fact, have fun. And I am now taking a break for the rest of this week and next week. So I will be back somewhere around here in maybe the second week in March. So in the meantime, have lots of fun, and I will see you in a week or two. Bye for now.